Hello, friends. Welcome back to HeartScapes, where we are learning the system of Reiki to be grounded, to be spacious, to be connected, to remember ourselves. My name is Michaela. For those of you who don't know me, owner of HeartScapes Reiki here in Central California. Welcome back to the studio. If you're new here, thank you so much for giving this space a try. If you are returning, welcome back. I'm glad to have you back here with us. I offer this free community class every month on rotating topics. Those topics are really drawn from largely conversations that I get to have with folks like you, just kind of seeing what is on people's minds, what are people curious about, what are they struggling with, and how might the system of Reiki help to address that. It's really central to my purpose here at Heartscapes to really help us to integrate the system of Reiki along with several other systems that I work with into our daily life to make them part of the rhythms of our life rather than something that we perhaps escape to or think of from time to time as a form of vacation or of self-care. It can certainly be those things, but really the most value that a system like Reiki will have to us is when it is integrated into our daily life. And so this is a kind of a playful space to see what that looks like and to be responsive to what is on your heart and mind, what you are working through in your lives. And so I'm always open to suggestions for future topics, things that you would like to dig into. That's always really helpful when you share what you would like to learn. The other way that I choose topics is seasonally. What is the season inviting us to consider? And we're going to be talking a lot about that today in this topic around vision and purpose. This is a topic that is really kind of in the field come January in our culture. And I want to talk about it in a way that's a little bit different than I usually see it discussed and really give us a little bit of spaciousness and context around the idea of vision and of purpose. And of course, to let the system of Reiki help us to do that. But first, as always, we like to drop into the space together, kind of call our attention here, set down our doing minds for a moment and just settle, and then kind of circle our minds around the topic for the day. And so I'm going to invite us to do that together right now. And so we'll just do that with some simple breaths and then a couple of simple reflection questions. So taking a moment to settle your body wherever you are. Whenever we begin practice, we just do a simple process of aligning our body, our breath, and our attention, our mind, with each other, so we can bring all of our resources here together. And so that begins with our body, letting ourselves just take a moment to notice what we need to feel comfortable, to feel well supported, to feel the ground firmly beneath our body. It's a great opportunity to practice checking in on small levels with ourself. Oftentimes our body is asking for small adjustments to be made that are really easy to ignore because we're going on about our business. So when we take a moment to pause, we can really notice, is there some muscle that needs a bit of a stretch? Is there some shift in position? Am I maybe just a tiny bit too cold or too hot? Is there some small adjustment that I can make in response to what my body is sharing with me? The more we take those small responses, the more we'll notice and the better aligned we can be. So just taking a moment to do that, to bringing your body into a place that feels well supported and comfortable. Sometimes we have restrictions on that. For example, we might be driving like Jewel is, but we can still take that moment to make a small adjustment, even if it isn't the full, maybe we'd rather be in a different place than a car seat, but we can still make those small adjustments wherever we are. And then with our body in a little bit more of a settled position, we can bring our breath into alignment by letting our belly be soft to make more space inside for our breath to move into our body and gently out. Letting our body expand and take up more space as we breathe. We often subconsciously hold our bodies tight, our bellies tucked in, armored up in that place, trying to, do whatever we're doing there. And so it can take a couple of breaths to invite softness in the belly and just really accept and perhaps enjoy the sensation of our body getting bigger as we breathe. And that allows our breath to move low in the body, to move all the way down into our belly, to breathe in a more natural way, the way we do when we're sleeping, the way we did when we were babies. And then with our breath and our body aligned together, we can bring our mind into alignment, resting your attention on the sensation of your breath, letting the movement of your inhale draw your attention in and down as much as you can in this moment. And if you can, resting your attention in your low belly, finding the point just below your belly button, deep into the center of your body. This grounded and centered place that welcomes you home, that remembers you when you bring your attention here. Let's take a few breaths here. And then with your next round of breath, I'm just going to invite you to again breathe into your belly. And as you breathe out, let your attention follow your exhale up, up, up the center of your body and rest in the center of your forehead. So we're going to shift our attention with our breath, inhaling into our belly and exhaling to the center of our forehead. And just follow that pattern of breath for a few rounds. Breathing into our belly and back out to our forehead. Let's do one more round like that. And on your next round of breath, again, breathing into your belly. And when you breathe out, rest your attention in your heart. And we'll do that for a few rounds. And now, resting your attention in your heart, I'm going to invite you to consider a couple of questions. Firstly, when you hear the word vision, what comes to mind? In this moment, what does vision mean to you? And where does vision live in your body? Where does vision live in your body? And when you hear the word purpose, what does that mean to you in this moment? What does purpose mean to you? And where does purpose live in your body? And gathering up what you've noticed, drawing your attention back to your breath. And on your next round of breath, following your exhale, up and out and back to the space you're in, and giving yourself a gesture of completion. So welcome back. I'd love to hear from you anything that came up in response to those questions. What does vision and purpose mean to you? Where do they live in your body? You can drop that in the chat, or you can come off of mute and let us know. While you are typing or considering or deciding if you're going to be brave and come off mute, I want to just give you a little bit of an overview of what I want to share today in this brief version of this class. It's on my heart to make a more in-depth version of this class that goes into much more practice. If you feel that this material is juicy once we get into it and you would like a longer, more extensive class, please do let me know. Your feedback always helps me to decide what kind of curriculum to design and to offer. But in this conversation today, I want to talk about three things related to this topic of vision and purpose, and to maybe frame it in a way that's a little bit different than we often see it framed at this time of year. So firstly, I want to talk about seasonal alignment and seasonal misalignment when it comes to vision and purpose. I want to talk about what it takes to achieve the impossible, to hold a vision that is so big it feels impossible, and yet can fuel us and be generative for us rather than discouraging. And lastly, I want to talk about the structures and perspectives inside the system of Reiki that can help us with all of this. And vision brought up fear for you. Fear of what is in my heart's desire but can never be manifested. Purpose lives in your heart. Thank you so much, Beth, for being really honest and vulnerable about that, because I think that's really, really at the heart of what I want to talk about. So let's just kind of begin with seasonal alignment. I want to just kind of get this one out there, because there's a way in which, and if you've been with me for some time, you'll have heard me talk about this a lot. The oftentimes misalignment that our kind of modern Western culture has with seasonal cycles. And this is not a trivial thing. Oftentimes, the demands of our society and the things that we're being asked to put our time and attention into are not well aligned with what the world is asking of us. We think about summer vacation, right? Summer in the world is a time for hard work. It's a time for the growing, the doing, the producing. If we're talking about food production, this is like serious hard work time. If we're talking about the world itself, this is when plants and animals are at their busiest, hard work. And yet, culturally, this is vacation time. It's the time of rest. It's the time of slowing down. It's the time of taking a break, right? Conversely, winter is the time of rest. It's the time of slowing down. It's the time of dreaming, the time of imagining, right? Yes, a time of visioning, but not a time of doing anything about it yet. It's a time of resting, of germinating. It's the time when seeds are in the ground. They're absorbing water, becoming softer, becoming more expansive. They're holding a whole lot of potential. They're just vibrating with that unexpressed potential, but it's not time to express it yet. And that's what our bodies recognize as the appropriate response to the seasons for the most part. We all have our individual rhythms, right? So they're like, I know people who actually feel a lot of like moving energy in wintertime. But for the most part, we are animals of this world. And we are primed in our DNA, in our body, mind, and heart's response to the world to be in alignment with what the world is up to, right? Seasonally. And winter is a time to be still, to be quiet, and to dream. And yet, we have this cultural perspective that says we have this calendar year. We have arbitrarily decided that January is the beginning of that year. And the beginning of the year is the time to hit the ground running, right? You set your vision, you create your vision board, and then you do something about it, right? You get those resolutions set, and then you get to work doing them, right? And this is a misalignment. There's no accident that something like 70 to 80% of people never fulfill their New Year's resolutions. There's been studies on this, right? We make so much of a point about setting these intentions, these resolutions in the beginning of the year, the very beginning of winter, and then getting busy to fulfill them. And most of us fail. There's a lot of reasons for that. One of the reasons, though, is that we're misaligned with what our bodies are telling us to do. Our body is telling us to rest. So if we've set an intention that we're going to, lose 20 pounds and we better get to the gym on January 1st, we're setting ourselves up for some hard failure, right? And so I want to just acknowledge that and say that this is a source of a lot of tension for many of us. It comes up again and again when I'm working with folks, that they're feeling ashamed of what their impulses are telling them versus what their family or work or culture is telling them. And when we dig into it a little bit, it's just not the time yet. It's not the right time to be taking those actions. Let me just pause. We have a couple more responses. So Tekla says, similar to Beth, vision feels like future. It brought up hesitation in your third chakra and power center. Purpose lives in me more in the heart center and felt more like my truth. Brittany, to me, vision feels like an overarching dream living in the mind, and the purpose feels like the heart's true job, task, and lives in the heart. Yeah, this is such a juicy material to work with, right? Because we often hear vision and purpose as being together, right? And they are in some really important ways, but we have to work with them in a way that is aligned with what our system is designed to do. And seasonal alignment is a really great place to start. It's not the only place to start, but it's a really important one. And I wanted to just get that out of the way ahead of time, because I've already had conversations with folks who feel like, gosh, all I want to do is rest. But like New Year's, we're supposed to go, right? This can bring up a lot of shame and a lot of discontent. Oftentimes I turn to poetry to help us to kind of ground into the material that we're in. And sometimes I remember that music is also poetry. And so I just want to turn to the poet that is Pete Seeger and the song Turn, Turn, Turn by the Byrds. And just remind us that to everything, turn, turn, turn. There is a season, turn, turn, turn. And a time to every purpose under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to reap, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to laugh and a time to weep, a time to build up, a time to break down, a time to dance and a time to mourn, a time to cast away stones and a time to gather stones again. To everything under heaven, there is a time. Every purpose has its time. So I wanted to just kind of ground us in that context setting, because if you're feeling that urgency to get her done here in January, The whole world, if you are in the Northern Hemisphere, is asking you to slow down, is asking you to rest. But it's not asking you to ignore vision, right? In fact, now is the time for being in a visionary perspective. Now is the time, again, to germinate, to soften and expand, to dream. This is dream time, people. This is juicy, juicy dream time. This is the time for imagination. This is second diamond time in a certain way, but we need to be grounded. We need to stay in the earth in order to let it be. So let me tell you a couple of stories from some mentors of mine that have really helped to shape how I'm thinking about this. So one is a more current mentor, one is a mentor that's been with me for a long time. I talked about this in our last Reiki practitioner circle, achieving the impossible day. So my gardening mentor is Jess Sowards. She runs a YouTube channel called Roots and Refuge Farm. I find her deeply inspirational, not only around gardening, but around how to live a good life. And her birthday is on December 16th. And at a certain point, she put out a video on her birthday that talked about the process of achieving the impossible vision. And she used her own family's example, that they came from deep poverty and now run a 27-acre farm with thriving businesses in their downtown, and just a lot of generative, amazing things for their family and for their community. And the gap between those two things, being in deep poverty and being in this thriving, sustainable lifestyle, was a point of great pain and tension for her for a long time. Because she's had this vision since she was a small child of living the kind of life that she is now living, of, growing her own food and being a place of like a community hub for sustainability and goodness in her community. And the gap between those two things, for the most of her life, felt impossible. There's absolutely no way to get from here to here. And there were vast parts of her life where she would shut down this vision. All right, she would make it smaller. She would deny it. She would say, I don't actually really want that, because it was too painful, because her reality was so far from that. But through largely her faith, her spiritual practice, her perspective is coming through a Christian lens, which is different than mine, but has really valuable perspectives inside of it. Just through this process of like teaching herself to be with that discomfort and to not shrink that vision, and to do things in their season, both the season of the world and her season of life. Because when we talk about seasons, of course, we're talking about the seasons of the world, but we're also talking about the seasons of our life, right? We can look at that metaphorically and say there's a season of my life. For example, if when I had my children, right, when they were tiny babies, that was a season to focus on that task, right? It wasn't a season to build a business, right? Those were not well-aligned seasons, right? There's seasons of our life where it's time to focus on one thing and not the other. The challenge is, how do we continue to hold and nourish that vision? And so I've just been kind of playfully celebrating December 16th as Achieving the Impossible Day in honor of this mentor of mine and this idea that we actually can hold a vision that is that big. Now, Beth, this comes right to what you shared, right? There's a lot of fear and there's a lot of pain that can be present when we hold a big vision for ourselves and it feels impossible. And the question is, how do we navigate that? The other mentor that comes to mind that's really shaped my thinking about this is Peter Senge. And Peter Senge is a writer and a teacher and a visionary in the realm of systems thinking, and a number of other things. But I studied under him around the concept of systems thinking and integrating all aspects of our life into a more integrated, systemic way of being. And I got to be in a workshop with him once, and I can't even remember all of the context of the workshop, but the central thing that I remember was this simple metaphor that he shared. He was talking about this gap between vision and reality, right? Of what we want to achieve and what is actually true in our life. That oftentimes, like our heart's desire, what our heart is truly asking for, is much bigger than we feel can be achieved. Again, it feels impossible. And there becomes this tension, like the tension that occurs when we pull a bowstring tight, right? We pull that bowstring with an arrow that we want to get really far. We want to shoot that arrow as far as we can. And we need a lot of tension to get that done. But holding that tension is uncomfortable. It can be painful, it can be difficult. It can be difficult to hold it long enough to take clear aim with that arrow before releasing it. And that's what happens with vision, right? If we have a big vision for ourselves, like Jess's farm, like her community teaching center, where she could teach her community about sustainability when she was living in the depths of poverty, it was painful holding that tension. And so there's two responses that we humans will often defer to release or reduce that discomfort. One, we might shrink the size of our vision, right? Or ignore it, or pretend like we don't even want it at all. Let's make it something more achievable. Let's make it something more possible, right? Let's make it more realistic, right? Oftentimes, if we hold a grand vision, and especially if we articulate it to other people, we might be accused of just being a dreamer, having our head in the clouds, right? Not being grounded in reality, right? But how does anything impossible get achieved? It has to be imagined first, or it has to come organically from the world, right? Without our interference, right? But if we're talking about achieving something in our own life, right, it has to live in our dreams first. And we have to allow it to be big. We have to allow it to be big enough to have pull on our life, to have a gravitational pull that draws us towards it. If we shrink it, it's no longer compelling enough to get us to change our behavior, to take action in its service, right? Because to achieve the impossible, we have to eventually take action in its right time, right? The other response that we humans might try to reduce that tension is we might ignore or lie about our current reality. Oh, we're not that far away from that vision, right? I've got more resources than I actually do. This tends to be my strategy. I am definitely a dreamer, a visioner. I live in the clouds a lot. My astrology is all like air and fire signs. Like my mind is whoop, 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 all over the place up here, right? I can imagine some big stuff. But to take the right action over time in a sustained way, to just for today be diligent, as the fourth precept of Reiki tells us, that is a real challenge for me. And so my strategy is usually to be like, it's not that far away. I can get there, right? And to ignore certain things about my reality that I probably need to take action on to actually move towards that vision. And so both of those strategies reduce the tension, right? Help us ease back on that bowstring. But if we release that bowstring with that arrow, it's not going to go very far, right? It's not going to go very far. And so the trick is to allow ourselves to dream and imagine bravely, greatly, daringly, audaciously, and then navigate the tension that causes so that we don't break under the pain of it, right? And the system of Reiki has strategies for helping us do that. The other piece is to notice, right? And this also is, it's definitely within the way that I teach and practice Reiki to be seasonally aligned, right? To say that right now, if you live in the Northern Hemisphere, I don't know if I have any of my Australian friends on right now, you're in a different season, right? So we could talk about that difference. But if you're here with me in the winter, this is not a time to take bold action. It's a time to rest and to dream and to tend to ourselves. There's an example in my own life right now. There's a challenge that has come up in my life, a change that is coming that kind of could go in two directions. One direction I very much want, another direction I very much do not want. The direction that I want feels like an impossible dream. It feels really big. It feels really challenging. For example, I don't have the money to do it, right? And so my options are to let go of this path altogether, right? To shrink that vision and say, this is good enough, right? Or to lie about what's actually possible. And what I'm noticing for myself is that, yes, I'm dreaming, I'm visioning along this path, but I'm also feeling a real urgency to do something about it. I'm like, let me do the things, let me take the action, let me push. I'm feeling a real pushing energy. And so right now, my practice is to remind myself, this is the time to dream. This is the time to let the vision grow, to let the images solidify, to let the expression of it become as full and big and audacious as I can, so that it has enough energy to pull me in its direction, but it's not time to act yet. And I'm really feeling that tension right now. I really am feeling it. And so this is well timed, this topic, which I planned before this situation came up, because I need the reminder that it's time to dream. Oh, good. Glad it's perfect timing for you, Jewel. Cool. So let's talk about how the system of Reiki helps us to think about this idea, right? Let me back up. One more example. One more point I need to make about the audacious, impossible vision. One of the things that we need to acknowledge in this is that as a strategy, making a huge vision, audacious, impossible vision, just gloriously, just sci-fi level wild vision, dream for our life, for our purpose, means that we will probably be dreaming things and imagining things that will not happen, that are in fact impossible, that aren't going to come to pass. And that's okay. It's part of the strategy, but it's also part of the discomfort, right? If we go again back to that metaphor of like a planetary gravitation, we need a celestial body that's big enough to create a gravitational pull that draws us in its direction, which means that that planetary body might actually have to be too big to achieve. But the goal is to move in its direction in ways that are generative, that are creative, that are sustaining, that are affirming to us, right? And so that we're moving from the place that we are, that we don't want to be, in the direction of what we want. But accepting that we may or may not achieve the full extent of this vision is part of the process. And the example that Peter Senge used for this in that workshop was the I Have a Dream speech by Martin Luther King, right? This speech is just a masterclass in the tension between current reality and vision, and a huge audacious vision. If you read through that speech, which I recommend that you do, listen to it, and read through it as he's speaking it. I mean, it's always a worthwhile time to listen to Martin Luther King speak. In fact, I often re-listen to that speech around this time of year. He's going back and forth between the current reality of racial violence and segregation, disharmony, painful life situations, and this incredible vision of racial unity and harmony, right? And he uses very specific examples, like what's going to be happening in his children's lives. What's it going to look like? Interactions on the street. How are people going to feel, right? What's society going to look like when this vision is achieved? This speech just goes back and forth between what it's like now and what I'm imagining, right? Literally, I have a dream that these things could be true. And we know for a fact from King's writings that he did not believe he would ever see that dream come to pass in his lifetime. He knew it. He knew it was too big to be achieved in the time that he had on earth, whether or not he knew that his time was relatively limited at that time. And yet he painted for us this imaginal vision that to this day inspires us to move towards it. It created enough gravitational pull to move thousands of people in its direction and to achieve things that in the 1950s seemed impossible. Do we have the incredibly glorious vision of racial unity and the obliteration of racism in our hearts and in our society? No, we don't. It's not yet fulfilled, and he knew that it would not be for some time. But he also believed in the possibility of it achieving. And he was able to have the spiritual fortification to be in the discomfort of that tension. We can do this in our own lives with whatever it is that we are dreaming for, whatever it is that is on our hearts. But we have to be able to navigate it. So let's take a look at what that looks like. And Joe is reminding us the term second diamond. Yep, we're heading there right now. So there's two ways that the system of Reiki helps us with this. One is through the precepts, the foundational principles that the system of Reiki is built upon. Those are, as a reminder, just for today, I anger not. Just for today, I worry not. Just for today, I am grateful. Just for today, I am diligent, or I am true to my way or my being. A couple of different versions of that fourth precept that have come to us through Mikao Usui. And fifth, just for today, I'm compassionate for myself and others. That simple list of perspectives, of mindsets, of behaviors, of ways of thinking and feeling describe a way of being that can hold all of the tension that is present when we are talking about this visioning process. And in particular, I want to focus on that fourth precept. I mentioned it earlier as just for today, I am diligent, because that's one I often need because of my flighty nature. I often need to remind myself to be diligent. The other translation of that, the other version of it that has come to us, just for today, I am true to my way and my being. My way and my being. We could also think about that as the doing part of myself, my way, the way that I am moving through my life in this time-bound, body-bound existence. I am making choices, I am taking steps, I am moving, I am walking my way through my life. And then there's my being, right? This is the eternal part of ourself, our great bright light, our spark of life, the energy that is us, but is also all of life. It's our point on the web of life. And our being is very much about being, about not having to take action all the time. And part of navigating life in general, but in particular, this dynamic we're talking about today, is noticing what it takes to be true to myself in terms of my way. What choices am I supposed to make? What actions am I supposed to take? Am I supposed to rest? Am I supposed to take action? How am I supposed to respond? And my being. When is it time to just be and to be aware of something bigger than my own life? So that is one thing to navigate. And there are practices to help us to contemplate the precepts. I'll share in the email that I send after this class, and on the YouTube version, I'll put it in the show notes, the instructions that I recorded for a simple precepts contemplation practice, as well as the breathing practice that we opened with. And that is a really powerful and valuable practice for helping us really be with the precepts, bring them into our life, bring them alive in our life, in our day-to-day, in a given moment. And to be with that fourth precept, just for today, I'm true to my way and my being, is a way that we can help navigate that tension. What am I meant? How am I meant to be in this particular moment, right? So in my example for my life that I just mentioned, right now, I am very clear that what would be most valuable to me, that would be most beneficial to me, and would best serve this vision that I'm holding, is to be still, is to be restful, is to let myself dream and imagine into it, right? Don't shut it down. Don't ignore it, right? Because that's the ignoring reality piece, right? I could be like, well, I'm just going to kick the can down the road on this problem, but this is a time-bound problem. I have 6 months to a year to solve this problem. And the solution is going to take a lot of time and effort, right? So I can't ignore it. I can't forget about it. I can't be like, I'll deal with that later. I got to rest now. I got to rest and dream and vision at the same time. Okay. So right now, that's what being true to my way and my being looks like. Perhaps that's similar for some of you around things that you're feeling any tension around. The other thing that the system of Reiki gives us is a map. Oftentimes in Western Reiki, Reiki is associated with the energy map of the chakra system. From its Japanese origins, we're dealing with the same energy system. The energy system is the energy system, but the map looks a little different. We're going to take a look at that right now. So in Japanese tradition, the three energy centers that are most prominent and that are used to help understand how we navigate our life are located in the belly, in the hara, first diamond, in the head, and in the heart. Those three places that we visited in our meditation earlier. My teachers, Francina and Bronwyn Logan, at some point in the past named this energy system the three diamonds. And so that is a very useful name and concept to use. And so I love this graphic that I created a while back to just help us visualize that. So we have the first diamond in the hara. This is our grounded, rooted place. It's the place where we feel our connection to the earth. It's associated with our body, with our physical being, and with the connection between our physical being and the earth. We have to start there because we are animals of this world. Always. Until we die and maybe become something else. I don't know. I don't have an opinion about what happens after we die, but I do know that while we are alive, we are animals of this earth. And it is incredibly important to our well-being to remember that and to act accordingly. And so meditations, practices, there's such a wide range of creative ways to kind of connect with our earth body. One of the things that we explore in our Reiki 1 and Reiki 2 classes is a wide range of creative ways of engaging with these three diamonds. And so lots of really juicy earth practices that are available to us. But beginning with the simple practice that we opened with, simply aligning our body with our breath and resting our attention in our hara. Time and time again, as I lead myself and others through this practice, the result is a deep sense of grounding, of being connected to the earth, of feeling stable, secure, and restful, nourished, resourced. And if we think about the discussion we just had about vision, don't we need to begin with our feet solid on the ground, nourished and resourced, in order to sustain that vision? Once we have achieved some level of groundedness, of connection to our body and to the earth, then we can move to the second diamond, which is in the head. And that's the territory of spaciousness, the territory of vision, of purpose, of no, not necessarily purpose. That was a misspoke. It's the territory of vision and of possibility. There we go. I got there. The territory of possibility, of spaciousness, of wide openness, of just the whole universe laid bare above and around us in all of the many layers of possibility that exist there. But as you can see, if we only live in vision, as I tend to do, and we don't first get ourselves grounded solidly on the ground, then taking action towards that vision, staying focused, remaining diligent, right? Being with the tension of feeling under-resourced to achieve all of that possibility becomes very, very difficult. So the first lesson that Reiki has for us when considering all of this is to work with the seasons and to work with our body in the way that aligns with the world. So beginning with working with our belly, working with our first diamond, working with our body and our connection to the earth, our sense of resourcefulness. In the example that I gave from my life, as I mentioned, resources is a significant problem in this particular difficulty. I don't have the money to make the vision happen, right? And that can make me feel very much in a scarcity mindset. And that scarcity mindset will shrink the vision. will make it feel impossible. But when I do my Joshin Kokyoho breathing, a method to focus the mind, the practice that allows us to root into our belly and feel that sense of being resourced beyond our own little body. If we think about what happens under the ground, right? The roots of a tree reach out for each other. Some plants are designed to literally hold hands under the ground, to hold each other up, redwoods in particular. There's a whole mycelial network of mushrooms, of fungus that connect, that resource, that literally move resources from one plant to another, from a place of scarcity or from a place of abundance to a place of scarcity, right? There are mechanisms in the world to share resources in a way that makes the impossible possible. There's many examples of trees that have lost their access to their own root system, but that are connected to another tree, and that other tree is keeping them alive. Seems impossible, but it happens in nature all the time, and it happens in our own lives. So we begin with the first diamond, getting ourselves grounded and resourced. Then we can move to the second diamond, where we can tap into that sense of infinite, that sense of possibility, that sense of wide openness. And then we can come to the third diamond in the heart. And one of you mentioned earlier that for you, purpose lives in the heart. And that is true for me as well. Purpose is a big topic that perhaps we'll dig into in more detail another time. But if we think about purpose as our animal selves being in alignment with the world in a way that is generative for ourselves and for others, right? We can see how important it is to be in this map and to come into that heart, the territory of courageous, compassionate connection. The heart is the place where we can act boldly, right? In the Buddhist system that forms the underpinnings of the system of Reiki, we talk about being in right mind, being in right voice, being in right perspective, and right action. That center of right action is in the heart. When we do Reiju, when we do the initiation or attunement process, the center of the heart is where we focus on right action, right? And so once we have this balance, this harmony between the rooted place below and the spacious place above, then we can come to that place of purpose, that place of right action in the right time, in the right season, right? When the turning has brought us there. Part of what this does is help teach us patience and to be able to hold patience in the face of urgency. I had another mentor in grad school. She always said, when you feel the most urgent, when you feel like there's no time to achieve what you need to do, slow down. It feels so counterintuitive, but it's so, in practice, it's so true. That oftentimes when we feel that sense of urgency, there's not enough time to do the thing. That's when we start to make mistakes. We start to take shortcuts. We start to drop things off. Time and time again, if I can remember to slow down in those moments and to root back down into the ground, the outcome is far greater than if I had stayed with the urgency. So the system of Reiki is simple. The practices and perspectives within the system from its origins are very simple. They're not necessarily easy. Nothing that we've talked about today is easy, but it is simple. It's accessible to us, and it's accessible in a given moment. I always try in these discussions to kind of navigate the abstract and the concrete. All right, so please let me know if this feels too abstract, if this feels too unrelatable, right? Because the goal is to feel this sense of possibility, and the way that simple practices can help us to hold that. So Shirley recommends the book, The Overstory by Richard Powers. It tells the story of the lives of trees and how interconnected they are to each other, to our ecosystem, and to each other. Powerful, moving, sad, but hopeful book. Yeah. The Secret Life of Trees is another that does that. I'll try to remember to put those resources in the follow-up email. I am a huge believer and proponent in my own life and in my teaching of looking to nature to teach us how to do everything, how to do everything, right? Especially this kind of work where we're navigating the unseen. I mean, what is a vision if not the absolute mystery, right? The unseen space, right? The territory of dreams, the territory of imagination. And how often does our culture tell us, oh, don't be a dreamer, keep your head out of the clouds, right? Imagination is just about escapism, right? We use our imagination to escape from reality. No, we do not. We use our imagination to create our reality. Nothing that humans have created existed before it was imagined by somebody. And that person had to have the grounding and the resources and the sense of, fortification in themselves, despite perhaps desperate circumstances, to take the right actions in the right time. And that is what we can do in our life around whatever it is that we're dreaming into. The practice of vision boarding, which is so commonly practiced in January. Everybody on my Facebook feed is sharing their vision boards. I haven't finished mine yet. It's actually a really seasonally appropriate and beautiful practice. I strongly endorse the practice of vision boarding. And if we're going to do it, make that vision audacious. When I make a vision board, I put things on there that are I just know that they're impossible, right? I put it on there, and then I put that vision board up where I can see it. The challenge, to align with what we've been talking about today, is to realize that January 1st is not the time, most likely, to take big actions. Let that vision germinate. Take your vision board, let it be a visionary image or an auditory one. And not everyone is visual. Some people make kind of more like musical visions, right? However works for you. Happy to talk about creative ways to create a tangible place to hold your vision. But however that looks for you, put it somewhere where you can interact with it every day, where you can see it, where it becomes that celestial body that has enough gravitational pull to pull you in its direction. And what I've noticed in my life in years of using this technique, of using a vision board along with Reiki meditations and precepts contemplations that allow me to work with that map that we just looked at. The combination of those things is incredibly powerful because it trains our attention to focus in the direction of the impossible, in the direction of our imagination and our dreams. And when we do that, and we go through our day, and we have hundreds of choice points in a given day, decisions to make. Do I go this way? Do I go that way? Do I do this? Do I do that? More often than not, we'll make choices that move in the direction of that vision because it's there in our field. It's enticing us. It's stimulating our imagination. It's getting into our dreams. It's nourishing us, right? And then we need to notice, is there fear that comes up? Is there tension? Is there pain? Is there depression? Is there shame, right? People can feel a lot of shame about the desires of our hearts, right? Those things then need to be addressed so that they don't get in the way of that gravitational pull. So we are at the end of our time. In my follow-up email, again, I'll put resources to the two practices we've talked about today. If you've been in these classes with me for a while, you might have noticed that we always circle back to these same two practices, precepts contemplations and 3-diamond breath work, because it truly, truly does impact every aspect of our life. I'll share the book resources that folks shared in the chat and ways that you can follow up with me if you'd like. This kind of work is absolutely my heart and my purpose. I work with people one-on-one to do kind of visioning coaching, or using the system of Reiki, using the system of soul collage to work on a particular vision. So if that is of interest, I would love to follow up with you about that. And in March, we will be beginning our next round of our extensive deep dive into the system of Reiki, which has been revised into a 9-month program that begins in March. It is a deep, spacious, flexible, comprehensive Reiki education that walks us through all of these pieces and more. So if that is of interest, I'll put that in the email as well. And I'd love to have you join me for next month's free community class, the topic of which is on my list, but I am not remembering it at this moment. But in the email will be the link to that next class in February. And Joe, just as a closing remark, shares, I like how purpose often relates to heart's desire, which is from which right action flows. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think I very much agree that that feeling of purpose really lives in that heart space, and it's a tender thing, right? It's a tender thing, and we have a lot of people and a lot of systems and structures in our life that try to tell us what our purpose is, what our vision should and should not be, and we need to be clear about it from our inside before we take it to the world, because the world will always try to shape what our vision is. And that's okay, right? We have to enact our vision and our purpose in collaboration with the world, but we need to be very rooted in what's actually right for us, right? What is true to our way? What is true to our being, before we let influence come from other people who are living inside of their own structures, their own fears, their own desires of their own heart that might not align with ours. I'm glad that this hit home for you, Brittany. Thank you all so much for joining me. I look forward to being with you again. And as you move from this place into your own visioning, into your own territory of courageous, compassionate action, may you be deeply provisioned for that journey. Thank you so much for being with me. Until next time, I love you.